Close your eyes and imagine a connected world. Palaces humming with scribes, copper and tin sailing along blue water lanes, diplomats swapping gifts in embossed gold. Then, in a single human lifetime, the lights go low. Palaces burn, scripts vanish, trade stops, farmers pull back to hilltops. Coastal cities send desperate letters for help that never comes. This is the story of the Late Bronze Age collapse, roughly 1200 to 1150 BCE, when a dozen powers around the eastern Mediterranean and beyond were wrecked or remade. Even farther east, the Indus Valley civilization had already ebbed, and Minoan Crete had long been absorbed. The shipwreck at Aluberon hints at how interlocked that world was. The charred tablets at Pylos whisper how fast it ended. What follows is the how, the why, and what rose from the ruins. The world before the fall. One network, many palaces. Before the collapse, a shared system tied palace economies from Greece to Anatolia, Syria, Cyprus, and Mesopotamia. Bronze, 9 parts copper to 1 part tin, was the fuel for tools, chariots, and prestige goods, and it demanded long-range coordination. The Aluberon shipwreck, sunk off southern Turkey circa 1300 BCE, carried copper and tin ingots sufficient to melt around 11 metric tons of bronze, plus luxury cargo from at least half a dozen regions. This wasn't a random trade. It was a supply chain with palace buyers and diplomatic middlemen that depended on steady seas and steady politics. When a system this interlocked wobbles, everything feels it. Mycenaean Greece was the western anchor of that network. Palatial centers, Mycenae, Pylos, Tiryns, Thebes, managed land, labor, and shipments with clay records in Linear B. Those tablets weren't meant to last. They survived only because the building that housed them burned, baking the clay hard. That's why we can still read emergency notations from Pylos as the palace prepared coastal watches shortly before its final destruction around 1180 BCE. Within decades, most palatial centers were destroyed or abandoned. Linear B ceased to be written, and Greece entered a centuries-long dark age of reduced trade and simpler material culture. To the northeast, the Hittite Empire managed a vast landlocked center with roads, grain depots, and treaties. Then the capital, Hattusa, was abandoned and later burned, and the empire splintered into small Neo-Hittite states. High-resolution studies of Anatolian juniper tree rings and isotopes point to an unusually severe drought around 1198 to 1196 BCE, plus or minus 3 years. The kind of multi-year shock that can topple even resilient agrarian systems when combined with war and internal troubles. On the Syrian coast, Ugarit sat at the crossroads of copper, timber, and purple dye. Its king, Amurapi, sent a last letter. "My father, behold, the enemy's ships came here. My cities were burned. 7 ships inflicted much damage." The tablet, found in the ashes and dated close to 1185 to 1190 BCE, reads like a siren fading in smoke. Ugarit never recovered. Across the water, Cyprus, Alatia, a major copper source, was shaken. Sites like Enkomi showed destruction at the transition to LC3, circa 1200 to 1100 BCE. Yet Cyprus did not simply die. Some areas flourished in the aftermath, reorganizing trade in the early Iron Age as new peoples and scripts circulated. Collapse and adaptation went hand in hand. Meanwhile, the Sea Peoples, a loose label in Egyptian records for migrating raiding groups, moved by land and sea. In year 8 of Ramses III, circa 1177 BCE, Egypt recorded and carved in relief a battle against them at Medinet Habu, the best primary evidence for their scale and mix of tribes. Egypt repulsed them, but farther north, their movement intersected with other stresses, turning shock into a cascade. Even outside the main theater, older dominoes had already fallen. The Indus civilization had been fading since circa 1800 to 1900 BCE, as monsoon shifts and river changes undermined large urban centers, pushing populations east toward the Ganges. The Minoans on Crete had been weakened long before, by the Thera eruption in the 16th century BCE and by the eventual Mycenaean takeover. By 1200 BCE, their earlier shine was a cultural memory woven into Mycenaean life. The point is simple. By the late 13th century BCE, interdependence was a strength and a risk. Shortfalls in grain, copper, or security in one zone rippled through others, and then the ripples turned to waves. East of Greece, Hittites, Ugarit, Cyprus, Troy, Arzawa, Amaru, and the Sea Peoples. In Anatolia, the Hittite heartland ran from Hattusa. It was fed by vassals and grain depots. Then the pillars cracked. Failed harvests, internal strife, enemies testing every frontier. Tree rings and isotopes flag a multi-year drought around 1198 to 1196 BCE. Empty granaries made angry subjects. Hattusa was abandoned, later burned, and the empire splintered into small Neo-Hittite states. It didn't retire, it collapsed. South on the Levantine coast, Ugarit blinked out in an instant. Letters found in the ashes report enemy ships, troops away, pleas unanswered. The fire baked the archives and froze the ending. With Ugarit gone, a key hub in the copper, timber, textile circuit vanished. Trade lines frayed. Across the water, Cyprus, Alatia, shook but adapted. And Komi shows destruction around circa 1200 BCE, yet new centers rose. In the early Iron Age, Cyprus partnered with rising Phoenician ports. Copper didn't so much disappear, distribution just changed hands. Troy sat on the hinge of Aegean Anatolian traffic. Archaeology shows an earthquake layer, 6H, and a layer that shows violence broke out, 7A. Was it siege? Civil war? Both? Either way, Troy rebuilt, then pivoted again. A stagger, not a straight fall. Arzawa, in western Anatolia, had already been hammered by the Hittites. When Hatti unraveled, the west dissolved into Luwian-speaking principalities. Amurru, wedged between Egypt and Hatti, felt every tug. When the great powers faltered, Aramean groups moved in. Coastal Phoenicians and inland post-Hittite states filled the map. Amurru didn't leave a single ruin like Ugarit. It dissolved into the Iron Age mosaic. Threading through all of this were the Sea Peoples, names carved at Medinet Habu under Ramses III: Peliset, Jeker, Denyen, Shekelesh, Sheridan, Teresh. Reliefs show carts of families and ship-to-ship battles. They were not the only cause. They were an accelerant. Migrants and raiders moving through a region already strained by drought, war, and brittle interdependence. Egypt beat them back but weakened. Some groups likely settled in Philistia in 1150 to 1100 BCE. Put it together, and a pattern is clear. The Eastern Mediterranean palace world died of many wounds: climate shocks, broken storage and redistribution, lost ports, mobile enemies. The map didn't empty, it shrank and hardened. West of the Levant, Mycenaeans, Minoans, Cyprus again. East to Mitanni, Kassite Babylonia, and the Indus Echo. In Mycenaean Greece, the palaces, Pylos, Mycenae, Tiryns, Thebes, went down between around 1200 to 1150 BCE. At Pylos, scribes still wrote Linear B when the fire came. The blaze baked the tablets and preserved the panic. When palatial administrations died, the script died with them. Greece slid into a centuries-long dark age, fewer imports, simpler burials. Yet places like Lefkandi stayed lively. The civilization didn't vanish overnight. It localized and remembered. The Minoans? Their peak had passed. The Thera eruption in the 16th century BCE shook Aegean networks. By around 1450 BCE, the Mycenaeans ran Knossos with Linear B. By 1200, Minoan was a heritage inside a Mycenaean world that was itself failing. Return to Cyprus, copper capital, bruised but resilient. And Komi's fall signaled stress, but the island recentered and helped stitch together the early Iron Age economy alongside Phoenician traders. Collapse, then retooling. Northeast, Mitanni had already been picked apart, first by Hittites, then Assyrians. Its rump, Hanagalbat, turned into an Assyrian province. Not every vanishing was simultaneous. Some were prequels to the main collapse. In Babylonia, the Kassites weathered the first storm. Then Elam struck 1158 to 1155 BCE, sacked Babylon, and stole the gods. Nebuchadnezzar I later marched east and brought Marduk home. Babylon staggered, rallied, then yielded to Assyria. Not dead, repatterned. Arzawa and Amaru mostly merged into successor landscapes: Luwian principalities in the west, Arameans inland, Phoenicians on the coast. Troy remained the emblem of ambiguity: quake, war, rebuild, pivot. Typical of cities trying to land on their feet. Farther east, the Indus cities had ebbed earlier. Monsoon and river shifts undercut big urban centers. Populations migrated east toward the Ganges, trading monumental grids for smaller settlements. Collapse as transition, not a single sack. Across the region, the question repeats: vanish or transform? Palaces and scripts often vanished. Peoples, skills, and routes usually changed shape. Why it happened, how it felt, and what rose after. No silver bullet, just stacked shocks. Climate first. Tree rings and isotopes in central Anatolia mark an extreme drought around 1198 to 1196 BCE. Similar signals appear elsewhere. 2 or 3 failed reigns and palace economies optimized for grain and chariot fodder cascaded into famine, revolt, and lost frontiers. Next, systems fragility. The late Bronze Age ran on narrow choke points, ports like Ugarit, copper from Cyprus, diplomatic convoys at sea. The Aluberan cargo, ingots, glass, luxury goods, proved how tightly things were wired. Break a node and distant gears jammed. Then warfare drifted. Elite chariots met massed infantry and archers. Mobile groups pressed into weakened coasts and river mouths. Medinet Habu gives us the snapshot. Fleets colliding, families on carts, names etched in stone. Egypt survived the battles and still shrunk. Add wildcards. Earthquakes at Troy, plague in Hittite texts, and the trough deepened. Finally, human choice under stress. When roads turned unsafe and storehouses thin, palaces rationed, locals hoarded, villages pulled inward. Archaeology shows the result: smaller houses, local pottery, patchy burn layers, from post-palatial Greece to parts of Syria and Anatolia. How did it feel? Like smoke in the archives at Pylos, where burning shelves baked the tablets. Like a last dispatch at Ugarit as enemy ships closed. Like a Hittite farmer counting dead sheep through a second dry spring. Like a Cypriot smith burying a hoard and heading uphill. And then reinvention. Alphabetic scripts spread. Iron tools went from rare to normal. Neo-Hittite states, Arameans, early Israel and Judah, Phoenician ports took shape. Assyria rebuilt into a powerhouse. Babylon rallied. Greece climbed from dark to archaic. The Kassites ended. Ugarit ended. Hattusa ended. Yet routes, crafts, and stories reassembled under new names. If there's a hopeful thread, it's continuity of skill. Sailors still read coasts and stars. Smiths hammered iron when bronze lines broke. Farmers chased the rains. After the crash, the loudest sound was not silence. It was the scrape and hammer of people starting again. Conclusion. The late Bronze Age did not end with a single blow. It frayed, pulled by drought, hunger, fear, and ambition, until the strands let go. What remained were people. Not royal titles or clay accounts, but sailors who still knew the coastline by heart. Smiths who could coax a blade from stubborn iron. Farmers who could read a dark sky and move. Writing tied to palaces went quiet. Memory slipped into stories and songs. Towns shrank. Routes shifted. New names appeared. The world did not vanish. It learned to breathe differently. That is the heart of it. Great rooms cracked, but hands kept working. Children grew up in smaller houses, under new banners, sounding out new alphabets. From those modest beginnings came the next age. If the collapse has a message, it is this: greatness is not the hall you built, but the skills you carry, the neighbors you can call on, and the stories strong enough to begin again. How would you like to get a deeper understanding of history, impress your friends, and predict the future more accurately based on past events? If this sounds like something you might be into, then check out the brand new Captivating History Book Club by clicking the first link in the description. To learn more about the Bronze Age, check out our book, Greek History, a captivating guide to the history of Greece, from the Bronze Age through classical antiquity to modern Greece. It's available as an ebook, paperback, and audiobook. If you found the video captivating, please hit the like button and subscribe for more videos like this.